This is one of the darkest, most heartbreaking true crime cases you'll ever hear. On Thanksgiving Day, young mother and pilot Kelsey Berreth vanished without a trace. For weeks, her family searched desperately, until investigators uncovered a nightmare hidden inside her home. Blood everywhere, scrubbed from the walls. What followed was a shocking betrayal, a twisted love triangle, and a brutal murder carried out in front of her baby daughter. This is not just another story. It is the most shocking, tragic, and unforgettable case you will ever watch. Kelsey Berreth was born on September 15, 1989, in Moses Lake, Washington. She grew up on a farm with her parents and older brother, learning the value of hard work from an early age. She helped with chores, tended to animals, and spent countless hours outdoors. But what fascinated her most were the crop-dusting planes that soared low over the fields, spraying fertilizer or scattering seeds. From childhood, Kelsey dreamed of flying. As soon as she graduated high school, she enrolled in college to pursue her pilot's license. She earned her wings and began working as a flight instructor, all while continuing to help her parents on the farm. Teaching people to fly kept her busy, but her biggest dream wasn't about work. It was about starting a family. By 2016, at 27 years old, Kelsey believed that dream was finally within reach. She met a man named Patrick online, and the connection was instant. Like Kelsey, he was a farmer, and he shared her vision of a large family. After months of long conversations, Kelsey made a life-changing decision. She moved to Colorado to be with him, and before long, they were engaged. Settling into her new life, Kelsey found work as a flight instructor at a respected aviation school that specialized in training military pilots. It was a prestigious job, but it came with a challenge. The school was 70 miles from Patrick's farm. To balance the commute, Kelsey rented a place in Woodland Park, close enough to work, but still within driving distance of Patrick. The couple spent weekends and evenings together, and their relationship seemed to be moving forward quickly. In early 2017, Kelsey learned she was pregnant. That fall, she gave birth to a baby girl. To anyone looking in, it seemed like her dream life was falling into place. She had a promising career, a fiancé, and now a family. But almost as soon as their daughter was born, cracks began to show. Patrick grew distant. He seemed less interested in Kelsey, less invested in their relationship, and less enthusiastic about their life together. Kelsey noticed the shift, but refused to give up. She was determined to hold the relationship together, for the sake of their daughter and for the future she had always imagined. On the morning of November 22nd, 2018, Thanksgiving Day, Kelsey called her mother. They talked about her plans for the holiday, and Kelsey mentioned she was heading to the grocery store to pick up ingredients for dinner. It was a casual, ordinary conversation, one that would soon take on haunting significance. Over the next several days, Kelsey's mother received a few text messages from her daughter. Then, suddenly, the messages stopped. Calls went unanswered. Days turned into nearly a week with no word from her. At first, her mother assumed Kelsey was busy juggling her job and caring for a 1-year-old. But as the silence stretched on, worry gave way to dread. When her son, Kelsey's older brother, admitted he hadn't heard from her either, alarm bells went off. Desperate for answers, Kelsey's mother finally called Patrick, hoping he could explain. Instead, his response only deepened the mystery. Patrick claimed that he and Kelsey had broken up on Thanksgiving Day itself. According to him, Kelsey had told him she needed space and wanted to end things. He said she dropped off their daughter with him, gathered a few of her belongings, and left. He insisted he hadn't heard from her since. It was a story that left detectives and Kelsey's family grappling with more questions than answers. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. From the start, Kelsey's mother doubted Patrick's story. She knew her daughter too well. Kelsey would never abandon her 1-year-old without so much as a phone call. And there was another glaring problem. She had spoken to Kelsey on Thanksgiving Day, the very day Patrick claimed they had broken up. Kelsey hadn't mentioned a split. On the contrary, she was upbeat and looking forward to cooking dinner. Uneasy, Kelsey's mother asked Patrick to check on her. He agreed, but said he had farm work to finish first. The call never came. He never followed up. That was the breaking point. Convinced something was terribly wrong, Kelsey's mother contacted police. An officer was dispatched to Kelsey's home. Outside, her car was parked in its usual spot. Inside, however, there was no answer. Without a warrant, officers couldn't enter. All they could report back was that Kelsey wasn't there. Patrick repeated the same story he had given Kelsey's mother. Kelsey had left him, saying she needed time alone. But this time, he added a new twist. She had supposedly taken some of her belongings, including her handgun. He suggested she had been behaving strangely and implied she might have harmed herself. Investigators secured access to Kelsey's home, and what they found deepened the mystery. Nearly all of her possessions remained untouched. Her clothes, her important documents, her everyday essentials. Nothing indicated she had packed up and left. The only thing missing was her car keys. It was baffling. Her car was still outside, yet the keys were gone. Why would she take her keys but leave her vehicle behind? The pieces didn't fit. At that point, police officially opened a missing persons investigation. One of their first steps was to analyze data from Kelsey's phone. What they discovered only added to the confusion. The last signal from her phone had pinged on November 25th, 3 days after she was last seen. The location? Gooding, Idaho, nearly 800 miles away. The lead made little sense. Kelsey had no friends, no relatives, no ties of any kind to the tiny town. Her family was adamant. She had no reason to be there. Detectives reached out to local law enforcement in Gooding, who canvassed the area. But in a place that small, a newcomer would have stood out immediately. No one had seen her. The Idaho lead fizzled, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. If Kelsey hadn't gone there herself, then who had her phone? Detectives obtained CCTV footage from the grocery store where Kelsey had shopped on Thanksgiving morning. The video was striking for one reason. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was troubled. She wasn't in a rush, didn't appear anxious, and certainly didn't look like a woman planning to walk away from her life. She calmly bought groceries for dinner, and even picked up a flower before leaving. Back at her home, a second police search turned up no new leads. Days passed without progress. Growing desperate, Kelsey's mother and brother flew to Colorado to join the search themselves. They stayed at her house, and almost immediately, her mother sensed something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but the atmosphere felt off. Then, one afternoon, Kelsey's brother made a disturbing discovery. While using the bathroom, he noticed something red smeared inside the toilet. On closer inspection, he realized it looked like blood. He alerted police, and forensic tests confirmed it. Human blood. That revelation prompted a far more thorough forensic sweep. This time, investigators used luminol, a chemical that reveals even the faintest traces of blood long after someone tries to clean it away. When they sprayed the bathroom, the reaction lit up the room in eerie blue glows. Blood was everywhere, on the walls, on the floor, scrubbed but not erased. The same scene unfolded in the living room. Under the luminol, large wiped-away stains appeared, exposing a grisly crime scene that had been carefully concealed. Samples were collected and analyzed. The results confirmed what everyone had feared. The blood belonged to Kelsey. But there was more. Among the samples, forensic experts identified 2 additional DNA profiles, one male, one female. At this point, investigators were nearly certain Kelsey was dead. The question shifted from "where is she?" to "who killed her?" And the DNA suggested she hadn't been alone when it happened. Patrick quickly became the prime suspect. His version of events had already raised doubts, and now, with blood evidence pointing to homicide, suspicion around him intensified. Detectives obtained his phone records and found that he had continued calling and texting Kelsey until November 25th. The same day her phone had pinged in Idaho. The text exchanges focused on their supposed breakup. Nothing in them stood out, except for what was missing. Investigators didn't believe Kelsey had written those messages at all. In their view, the timeline was different. Kelsey had likely been killed on Thanksgiving Day, shortly after returning home from the grocery store. If that theory was true, then the messages sent over the next 3 days weren't from her. They were from someone else, using her phone to create the illusion she was still alive. It was a chilling realization. The digital trail wasn't proof of life. It was a cover-up. Detectives soon spotted something in Patrick's phone records that caught their attention. Around the time Kelsey vanished, he had repeatedly called a number with a Gooding, Idaho area code, both before and after her disappearance. They traced the number and learned it belonged to a woman named Crystal. Curious, investigators called her and asked how she knew Patrick. Crystal described him as a business partner, explaining that they co-owned several horses. When pressed about the last time she had seen him, Crystal hesitated. At first, she claimed she couldn't remember. Then, after some stumbling, she admitted they were supposed to meet shortly after Thanksgiving. According to her, they had planned to buy another horse, so she drove nearly 1,000 miles to Colorado to see it. But along the way, she learned Patrick didn't have enough money for the deal. So she turned around and went home. Detectives found her story highly suspicious. Who drives across multiple states for a horse that was never going to be purchased? And Crystal added an oddly specific detail. She hadn't even used her own car, claiming she borrowed a friend's vehicle because it was more fuel efficient. To investigators, it sounded like an excuse, an explanation for why her car wouldn't appear on traffic cameras or toll records. Before ending the call, detectives asked if she knew Kelsey. Crystal said she had heard about her on the news, but insisted she had never met her. That answer raised immediate red flags. At that stage, Kelsey's disappearance hadn't become national news. Crystal lived in another state. So how could she have already heard about it? Detectives decided to dig deeper. They discovered that Crystal had recently divorced, so they reached out to her ex-husband. His answers painted a far different picture than Crystal's. Yes, he knew Patrick very well. He explained that Patrick wasn't just a business acquaintance. He had been Crystal's first love. The two had known each other since 2006, carrying on an on-and-off relationship that spanned years. According to him, the affair never truly ended, even after Crystal married. He believed she was still seeing Patrick as late as 2017, the same year Patrick became engaged to Kelsey. Even more troubling, Crystal had lied to her ex-husband about her whereabouts after Thanksgiving. She initially told him she was visiting friends between November 24th and 25th. Later, when police began questioning her, she admitted to him that she had actually been in Colorado. Then came another detail that investigators found deeply suspicious. On December 4th, Crystal asked her ex-husband to accompany her to buy a new phone, claiming she had lost her old one. Detectives immediately took note of the timing. December 4th was the exact same day they had seized Patrick's phone for forensic analysis. At this point, investigators had enough to act. They secured a warrant for Crystal's DNA and flew to Idaho to collect it. While Crystal complied with the request, she refused to answer a single question. Meanwhile, detectives tracked down the friend who had loaned Crystal her car for the Thanksgiving trip. She willingly let them search the vehicle and mentioned that she always kept a handgun inside. When investigators checked, they noticed something disturbing. One bullet was missing from the magazine. The friend was adamant. The weapon had been fully loaded when she lent Crystal the car. She had no idea what happened to the missing round, and detectives knew this was only the beginning. Investigators soon turned to one of Crystal's close friends, a woman named Michelle. What she revealed completely changed the direction of the case. Michelle explained that in late October, about a month before Kelsey disappeared, Crystal had called her in tears. Through sobs, she confessed something shocking. Patrick had asked her to kill his fiancée. According to Michelle, Patrick claimed that Kelsey was mistreating their daughter. He told Crystal he couldn't do it himself because suspicion would immediately fall on him, so he needed someone else to carry out the crime. Michelle urged her to go to the police, but Crystal never did. This revelation confirmed investigators' worst fears. Both Patrick and Crystal were clearly entangled in Kelsey's disappearance. Yet despite the mounting evidence, they still lacked the one thing that could close the case: DNA or direct proof of what had happened to Kelsey. Then came the breakthrough. Crystal herself called detectives. She told them she had hired a lawyer and was ready to talk. When investigators sat down with her, she wasted no time. She admitted that Patrick had killed Kelsey and that she had helped clean up the crime scene afterward. Crystal went on to describe how Patrick had been plotting Kelsey's murder for months. From the very beginning, he wanted Crystal to be the one to carry it out. To persuade her, he repeated the same lies over and over. Kelsey was abusing their daughter, drinking heavily, using drugs. He convinced Crystal that the only solution was to get rid of Kelsey. Crystal eventually agreed, and together they began crafting plans. The first plan was simple. Since Crystal was a nurse, she had access to medication. She would poison Kelsey's favorite coffee and deliver it under the guise of being a new neighbor introducing herself. In September, she went through with the ruse. She bought the coffee, drove to Kelsey's house, and knocked on the door. When Kelsey answered, they chatted politely. Crystal handed her the drink, smiled, and left. But there was no poison in the cup. She couldn't bring herself to do it. She admitted she only wanted to see Kelsey face to face. The plan failed before it ever began. Patrick wasn't deterred. His second plan was more brutal. He told Crystal to drive to his farm, pick up a metal pipe he had prepared, and use it to bludgeon Kelsey. Crystal made the 1,000-mile drive, collected the weapon, and even pulled up outside Kelsey's home. But again, she froze. She sat in her car, unable to move, then drove away without ever stepping inside. Still, Patrick pressed on. The third plan was nearly identical, except this time the weapon was a baseball bat. Once again, Crystal made the long drive, picked up the weapon, and approached Kelsey's house. and once again, she couldn't bring herself to follow through. At that point, Patrick realized something. If Kelsey was going to die, he would have to kill her himself. According to Crystal, the murder took place on the afternoon of Thanksgiving Day. Patrick arrived at Kelsey's house carrying out what he disguised as a harmless game. He told her he had bought several holiday-scented candles and suggested she try to guess the fragrances while blindfolded. Kelsey went along with it, unaware of the trap she had just stepped into. As soon as Patrick tied the blindfold over her eyes, he grabbed the baseball bat and bludgeoned her to death. The most horrifying detail of all, their 1-year-old daughter was in the next room while the murder unfolded. After killing Kelsey, Patrick placed her body into a large plastic container and loaded it into his car. Then, chillingly calm, he drove to his family's Thanksgiving dinner with his daughter. While his relatives laughed and celebrated around the holiday table, Kelsey's body sat just outside, hidden in the trunk. Later that night, Patrick drove to a small town called Satikatsu Creek, where he had rented a barn. He left Kelsey's body there for several days. That same evening, he phoned Crystal. The message was blunt. She needed to come clean up the mess. Crystal knew instantly Kelsey was dead. To cover her tracks, Crystal borrowed her friend's car, thinking it might throw off investigators if police ever checked. She gathered cleaning supplies and drove nearly 1,000 miles to Colorado. On the way, Patrick called again with a disturbing request. "Be careful," he warned, because he couldn't find one of Kelsey's teeth. He didn't want it surfacing later, especially not in front of Kelsey's family. When Crystal entered Kelsey's home, she was met with carnage. Blood was everywhere, spattered across walls, soaking into the floor, even streaking the ceiling. For more than 4 hours, she scrubbed and scoured, but some stains wouldn't come out, even with industrial-strength cleaners. Desperate, she collected anything saturated with blood, rags, towels, sponges, and stuffed them into garbage bags to take with her. When she was finished, she didn't rush away. Instead, she casually stopped at a cafe for food before meeting up with Patrick. Together, they drove to a gas station where Patrick filled a canister with gasoline. Then they headed to the barn, retrieved Kelsey's body, and brought it back to his farm. There, they built a fire. As flames consumed Kelsey's remains, Patrick's mother stepped outside and watched for a time. Whether she understood what she was witnessing has never been clear. Before Crystal returned home, Patrick handed her Kelsey's phone. For the next several days, she posed as Kelsey, responding to texts from family and friends to create the illusion she was still alive. Eventually, she destroyed the phone, erasing Kelsey's last link to the outside world. Despite playing a central role in the cover-up, Crystal insisted she was not a willing accomplice. She claimed she had been acting under duress, terrified that Patrick would kill her or harm her children if she disobeyed. According to her, every action she took was driven by fear. Before ending her confession, Crystal added one more detail. She said she had even tried to help investigators by leaving small traces of blood behind in Kelsey's home, hoping police would find them. Detectives, however, were skeptical. Her story didn't square with her actions. Crystal had been given chance after chance to stop the murder. Patrick had asked her to kill Kelsey 3 different times, and each time she drove hundreds of miles, prepared to go through with it. Even after Patrick killed Kelsey himself, she still didn't come forward. Instead, she cleaned up the crime scene, helped dispose of the body, and actively misled Kelsey's family by sending texts from her phone. Her confession wasn't born out of guilt. It came after her lawyer struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for cooperating, she would face only a single charge of evidence tampering for destroying Kelsey's phone. Every other charge was dropped. Still, her account gave detectives what they needed to return to Patrick's property with fresh eyes. This time, with Crystal guiding them, they went straight to the spot where Kelsey's body had been burned. Patrick had tried to erase every trace. Investigators had to dig through layers of dirt and ash before they finally uncovered what was left. Fragments of charred remains. There was almost nothing to analyze. Just a few bone shards, and most hauntingly, the tooth Crystal said she had found while scrubbing the house. The fire had destroyed so much that even DNA testing couldn't conclusively prove the tooth belonged to Kelsey. But there was one decisive breakthrough. Forensic testing on the DNA samples recovered inside Kelsey's home came back, and the results were damning. The two unidentified profiles matched Patrick and Crystal. That was the final piece investigators needed. Patrick was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In the months that followed, he sat behind bars, refusing to admit any responsibility. Prosecutors argued that Patrick's motives were twofold. First, his relationship with Kelsey had collapsed, and he wanted to sever all ties with her while keeping full control of their daughter. Second, he was drowning in financial problems and desperate to protect what was left of his farming business. Whether driven by control, money, or both, Patrick had carried out a brutal, calculated murder. And by the time his trial began, investigators had built a case strong enough to prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. One of the most incriminating pieces of evidence against Patrick came from his own cell phone. Data revealed that he had spent several hours at Kelsey's home on Thanksgiving Day, the day of her murder. This completely contradicted his version of events, where he claimed he had only dropped off their daughter and collected a few of Kelsey's belongings before leaving. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera drove the point home. It showed Patrick arriving at Kelsey's townhouse with their daughter, but instead of leaving minutes later, as he had told police, he remained inside for hours. Even more damning was the digital trail left by Kelsey's phone. After Patrick left her home, his phone records placed him at his farm, but Kelsey's phone moved right along with his. He hadn't even bothered to power it down. For days, the two devices tracked the same path until Patrick finally handed Kelsey's phone over to Crystal, who used it to send deceptive texts before destroying it. Investigators also tied Patrick to the crime through surveillance footage. One camera captured him transporting a large plastic container, the same one prosecutors said he used to conceal Kelsey's body. Another video showed him and Crystal at a gas station, filling up a fuel canister that would later be used to burn her remains. Then came an unsettling revelation during trial. A cell phone store employee testified that Patrick had visited the shop the very day police seized his phone, asking how he could remotely erase all of its data. Perhaps the most chilling testimony came from inside the jail. A fellow inmate told the court that Patrick had drawn up a hit list while awaiting trial. On it were 3 names: Crystal, her ex-husband, and Kelsey's mother. Even behind bars, Patrick was plotting violence. With phone records, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and Crystal's testimony stacked against him, the jury had little doubt. They unanimously convicted Patrick of first-degree murder. His sentence was life in prison without parole, plus an additional 156 years for related charges. Crystal, by contrast, received a shockingly lenient punishment thanks to her plea deal. She served less than 2 years in prison before being released, despite her repeated opportunities to stop the crime and her active role in helping Patrick cover it up. For Kelsey's family, justice felt incomplete. Yet, amid the grief, they found purpose. They were granted full custody of Kelsey's daughter, raising her in the safety of their home. And to honor Kelsey's lifelong love of flying, her parents created a nonprofit to support aspiring pilots, ensuring her passion and her memory will continue to soar. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.